Did you close the YouTube page? Welcome this evening. We should be concluding chapter 6, the Dhyana Yoga chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Very interesting discussion going on between Krishna and Arjuna. Before we begin our class, we'll chant the invocation mantras. These are 2 mantras to the principle of teacher in our spiritual path. 2 mantras to my particular teacher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, and 2 mantras, one to Lord Chaitanya, who's Krishna incarnate over 500 years ago, and the Maha Mantra. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gnanjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirbhashesha Shunyavadi Pastyatya Deshotarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Welcome to Bhagavad Gita, discussion on the 6th chapter, Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation. So we left off, we left off at text 33, and we'll try to finish this chapter. And from this chapter, we'll begin the
Sorry, Laksmi, I need to interrupt you.
How are you?
How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you for attending. Always lovely to have you.
Thank you. The thing is that I'm listening to all kinds of noises. No, it's not you. It's somebody that does not mute the
Yes.
mic.
I think they stopped. I think they turned, like, I heard it also, but I think it's off now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's read text 33 and have a little discussion of the ensuing verses. Dhyana Yoga, chapter 6, Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna said, O Madhusudana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. So it's very difficult for Arjuna because Krishna is describing the Ashtanga Yoga system, and the Ashtanga Yoga system requires a great deal of control of the senses and the mind. And also the Ashtanga Yoga system is a system of renunciation. So the big question that Arjuna is asking, and it may be a question that many of us would ask, is how are we going to do it in my current situation? Let's bring it to current times. Certainly Arjuna's position as a warrior, just about to engage in probably one of the most massive and destructive wars in human history. He's saying, how can I do what you're outlining here in this recent discussion about the Ashtanga Yoga system? Two things he mentions: the mind is unsteady. That's easy to understand. And restless. That's also easy to understand. Sometimes we affectionately address the mind as the monkey mind. Monkeys can be chattery, they chatter a lot, and they move a lot, and they bounce from limb to limb. And the mind can be like that. Our mind has almost endless chatter going on, and it goes from one thing to the other, from one limb to the other in terms of topics and past thoughts and future hankerings, and so many things are there. So Arjuna is telling him, this yoga system that you're just describing, of course, Krishna talked about Nishkama Karma Yoga initially, and that's to action without desire, to enjoy the fruits of our action. And that is more in line with Arjuna's status in society, position in society. And I believe Krishna began in the second chapter with an extensive discussion about that. But now Arjuna's reacting, how can I do this? I'm a warrior. And what you're describing to me, I don't think I can do. So, immediately, Krishna is saying that. And especially if you consider there's this equal vision that comes from what Krishna is describing, how to see with equal vision all living entities. And that requires this kind of meditation and an understanding of the nature of the world that we are currently in, because actually we are in two worlds. We are in the world of Prakriti. And if you remember, Prakriti means the material world, the material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. The first five are the gross elements that contain the objects that we interact with as long as we're encased in this body. We interact with this outer world and our sense objects, that which we see, that which we hear, that which we smell, taste, and touch are all comprised of, the gross material elements. And that's the world we navigate. And we have the subtle elements of mind and intelligence and ego. The overarching principle of mind, the mind that's fielding the sensory input that we're getting, on a moment-to-moment basis, the things that we're hearing, the things that we're seeing, all this data that's coming in, the mind fields that and categorizes that and slips it into understandable data. With all this data coming in, it kind of tries to make sense of it. And the mind has two other features to it, according to Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras, and Krishna also mentions intelligence and ego. So the intelligence is the discriminatory function that's there, and the ego is the identification function of the mind, how we are identifying with ourselves, meaning the selves that we see within the body, the male body, female body, black body, white body, yellow body, etc. All these different designations that are coming from the material body, that's made of these gross material elements, and also the subtle distinctions of the mind, intelligence, and ego, how we are identifying with all that. That's the one dimension that we live in. The second dimension that we live in is the dimension of our spirituality. And most people don't know the difference, or that there is even a difference there. And that becomes the problem. When we do not understand that there is a spiritual component to our existence, then that is the source of suffering, quite frankly, because the spiritual component of our existence supplies an energy called consciousness. Without the presence of the soul contains the energy of consciousness. Consciousness is infused within the 8 elements, the 5 gross and the 3 subtle. And that is what gives us life in this mortal world, in this mortal body. So yoga systems, Krishna is describing the Ashtanga yoga system, the 8 limbs, yamas, niyamas, pranayama, asana, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. He's describing that. But previously, he describes Sankhya Yoga in the 2nd chapter, which is the yoga system of analysis. And that is how he instructs Arjuna on the distinction between matter and spirit. That's how we see the distinction between matter and spirit, through the vision, through the system of Sankhya Yoga. We are not this, we are not that. And in this analysis, the understanding of Prakriti, material energy, which it comprises the temporary dimension of our existence, as opposed to Purusha, or the spiritual dimension of our existence. Without this understanding, yoga cannot be performed. We cannot really understand the nature of the self, and we cannot understand the nature of the world around us, and our existence and our purpose within it. So yoga deals with this quite clearly, quite lucidly, so that we're able to understand it. So 34 reads, "For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind." So an apt metaphor Arjuna is using here. The wind, here down here recently in South Florida, it's been very, very windy and rainy, and the wind is quite a force. So Arjuna is saying the mind is like that force of the wind. How can you control the wind? So the mind has that kind of forceful nature, and it's very difficult. So he's saying restless, the mind is restless, it can't stay fixed, it's turbulent, there's a lot of things going on in the mind, a lot of vrittis. Vrittis means a good analysis would be thoughts, like the thought process or the churning that's coming here, churnings that we get from knowledge, rightful knowledge, the churnings that we get from erroneous knowledge, the churnings that we get from imagination, from memory, and from sleep. Those are the five sources of the vrittis, or the churnings. Knowledge means correct knowledge. For instance, in my room, it would be correct to say that the walls are gray. That would be a correct knowledge. Erroneous knowledge would be when you guess or you speculate about something, and you are not using accurate sense perception to see it as it is. So there's a lot of things that occur during erroneous knowledge. Advertising quite often promotes erroneous knowledge. If you eat this, you'll become slim, or you'll become muscle bound, or they're always pushing what if you do this, then you'll become that. That's really not accurate knowledge. Maybe, but quite often it's not. So there's erroneous knowledge, there's accurate knowledge, and these are the things. There's memory, imagination, and sleep. These are the situations that create the vrittis, or the churning of the mind. So the restlessness of the mind, the turbulence of the mind, the obstinacy, even the rebellious nature of the mind. Even that you should be doing something beneficial. I really should be getting up earlier, or I really should be going to bed earlier, or I really should not be playing video games, or I get better things to do with my time and my mind. And you succumb to it. You succumb to these things. So this is the kind of obstinacy, stubbornness that we run into with the mind. And Arjuna is pointing all this out to Krishna, and it's very strong. It has that power to rebel, and has the force of turbulence and the movement of restlessness. So Arjuna is saying, I think to subdue it, like you're saying here, is a very difficult thing to do. Text 35, Lord Sri Krishna said, "O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind." So here Krishna is not disagreeing. Undoubtedly it is difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. So let's say you want to do 50 push-ups. How many of you can do 50 push-ups right now? I want you all to get down and do 50 push-ups. So you may say, no way, right? You all may say, oh, there is no way to do it. And you may be right. If I asked you to get down and you tried, you may get up to 3 or 5 or 10, or if you're in really good shape, maybe 20 or 25, but no way. But with practice, consistent practice, you'd be surprised. that what you can accomplish. So that's what that Krishna is saying. Undoubtedly, to curb the restless mind, true, noted, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. So suitable practice, that is what sadhana is. It is a daily regimen. Oftentimes when I describe yoga, I read this description and I really like it and I continue to use it. Yoga is a system or discipline which affords humanity the opportunity to achieve its highest potential. So, according to Gita, what is the highest potential? According to Gita, the highest potential is to engage in a loving relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's according to Bhagavad Gita. And there are other goals that one can achieve. One can see this is my goal. And certainly by the practice of yoga, you can get into good physical shape by performing asanas and pranayama. Certainly that's there. You can develop a stronger moral character by yamas and niyamas. Certainly all these things are there. But the definition I just quoted, the highest potential possible for the human being, that by engaging in a system or a discipline repeatedly with over a long period of time, then Krishna is telling Arjuna, yeah, it can be achieved. You can curb the mind. You can now, in different yoga systems, there are different emphases. In the Bhakti Yoga system, it's devotional service to the Supreme. And in various ways like japa meditation, kirtan, swadhyaya, the study and recitation of sacred texts, all these things are there within the Bhakti Yoga system. And in the other yoga systems, in the Jnana Yoga system, it's the chanting of various phrases from the Upanishads, which elucidate the fact that we are Brahman, that we are not the physical body, but in essence we are Aham Brahmasmi. That's one of the Mahavakyas in the Upanishads. And in the Patanjali yoga system, the classic yoga system of Patanjali, it's the yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayam. So the postures, the breath control, the practice of morality, systems of morality, then eventually pratyahara, to withdraw the senses from the sense objects, to bring the senses from external to internal, and then to practice concentration, and from concentration into meditation. Concentration and meditation, the difference is concentration is intermittent. It can be very brief. You can concentrate for a little while and then you lose concentration, you go back, etc. Meditation is when you practicing concentration, you are able to hold on to that particular focus or that object of meditation for a longer period of time, ultimately leading to samadhi, which is full absorption in your object of meditation. So Krishna is saying, practice, abhyas, and vairagya, detachment. You practice, you do your sadhana, and you detach yourself from the world. Now, oftentimes people are a little shy of the word detachment. But what I like about the Bhakti Yoga system is detachment is cultivated by attachment. And when we become attached to the positive things that are there, like in Bhakti, we become attached to good association. When we become attached to our meditation, our japa meditation, we attach to service, to cultivating a service mentality. a service to others, a service to Vaishnavas, a service to humanity, and ultimately a service to the source of all that, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when we become attached in that way, what follows is a detachment from material attachments that are due to our wanting to gratify our senses. So it's a more positive approach rather than detaching, just stepping back and renouncing. Renunciation, and that's what Arjuna is saying here. This form of renunciation is very difficult for me. So the Krishna will later elaborate on attachment, surrender unto me, manmana bhava madbhakto, fix your mind on me, etc. And then we get through our cultivating through this sadhana, cultivating this kind of mentality, service mentality, the mind elevates to the sattva gun platform, sattvic platform of goodness, the position of clarity, the position of knowledge, the position of happiness. It elevates to that, and from there we continue our sadhana until it becomes totally purified. And the attachment for that, for something which is better, a higher taste, param drishtva nivartate, Krishna reminds us, it's an attachment for something that's more pleasing. And we see that as we grow and we mature. We may have been attached to so many silly things when we were younger, and then as we got into our teen years, we look back on what we were attached to doing, when we were 5 or 6 or 7 years old, and we say, oh, that's silly. And then when we're in our 20s, we look back to what we were attached to doing when we were in our teens, and we say, oh boy, that was silly. How immature of me to be like that, to have a poster of this group or that group or whatever. And then we get into our 30s and our 40s, as we progress, as we cultivate a maturity in our consciousness level, we begin to understand that there's growth, there's maturity, and that is what happens when we perform sadhana. We see that the things that we maintain attachment for, which are impediments in our advancement in our spiritual practice, in our yoga practice, we see how foolish these things are. I just had a wonderful discussion with one of my godbrothers, Abhiram Das. He longtime disciple of Srila Prabhupada. He joined ISKCON, the Krishna Consciousness Movement, in 1969, and he was able to do personal service to Srila Prabhupada. And we quite often talk. He's in Vrindavan, India right now, and one of the things that he was saying is, Lakshmi, we're in our 70s. All the silly attachments that are preventing us, obstructing us from advancement, we have to give them up and be selfless. That when people who are seeking their path and are seeking knowledge, we have to be there for them. We have to take responsibility for those people. This is it. This is our time, and this is our obligation. This is our duty. This is our responsibility. And this is how we are able to give up this petty weaknesses of heart, which is obstructing us from our path. So it's an important principle. I've said this to you all before, according to the Vedas, the paradigm for learning is to hear, to reflect, to assimilate that knowledge into your life. And the fourth aspect is to share it, to distribute it, because that reinforces and encourages and enlivens us to further hear, to further reflect, to further make the endeavor to assimilate this knowledge into our life. It's a special blessing that comes that when we are fortunate enough to hear wisdom, from the wisdom texts of Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam and other wisdom texts, when we reread that and share that. I know Ishwari, I think it's you that makes the notes of your daily reading, right? You put that on the devotee chat group. So that kind of thing. Never minimize the opportunities that you have to share whatever wisdom that you're privy to due to good fortune, due to your efforts, your endeavors. Very important. And so when we talk about controlling the mind, how Arjuna is reacting, yeah, he's right. It is difficult. But when we engage the mind positively in various ways, as given to us in the various sacred texts and by sadhus, saintly personalities, both by their example and their instruction, and we take that, we imbibe that, we embrace that, then we see that the mind comes under control, because the mind matures, and the mind, through its aspect of intelligence, says, hey, I'm much more fulfilled when I'm doing my sadhana than if I'm neglecting it. So it's just something to consider for us. 36, for one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by appropriate means is assured of success. That is my opinion. So again, we see in succession of verses, Krishna is talking about, if you don't control the mind, very difficult, impossible to progress in yoga. If you make the effort, there will be progressive steps where control will come in. And what is one of the symptoms of control? That we have the ability to become the observer in all situations. That is one of the testimonies to if we're controlling our mind. If we are able to step back and be the observer. If you can step back and observe your mind, now you're making the distinction between mind and consciousness. And where does consciousness emanate? From the soul. Where is the mind emanating from? The mind is one of the subtle elements that has function. And that function is only motivated due to the presence of consciousness. So if we're able to step back and see ourselves as the observer of the mind, the observer of the demand of the senses, the observer of our interaction, both detrimental and beneficial interaction with fellow humanity, our interaction with the world itself, whether it's at work, whether it's at home with our family, whether it's with our friends, whether it's with strangers. If we're able to, as an observer, step back and view those interactions and how to make them better, kinder, milder, gentler, clearer, this kind of observership is a symptom of controlling the mind. Because when you're in the storm, when you're in the turbulence and caught up in the restlessness of it, when you're in a storm, have you ever been in a hurricane? Has anyone ever been in a hurricane? I've been in several. I've been in Sandy, I've been in Maria, I've been in Andrew, I've been in several hurricanes in the course of my life. And, it's all consuming, because when we were in Puerto Rico, we had just moved to Puerto Rico in June, and Maria, which was the worst recorded hurricane in 100 years in Puerto Rico, the winds were like 160 miles an hour. I mean, that hurricane, the turbulence, the wind, the rain, etc., was all consuming. We were, just like constantly praying to Krishna, oh Krishna, please don't let Trinavarta get me. It was just, that kind of consumption. So when we're in the midst of the turbulence of the mind and the restlessness of the mind, then that's where our consciousness goes. But the observer, when we can be the observer, we can actually step back. And even in the Hurricane Maria, there were moments where we were able to step back and to look at it and say, okay, this will end. This will end and we will be safe. And to have that kind of stability, that kind of steadiness. Because what Arjuna and Krishna is concurring, that unsteadiness, instability, restlessness, turbulence, all of these things are the symptom of the mind. And as long as we stay in that condition, under the dictations of that kind of presence, the presence of turbulence and restlessness, etc., then we cannot practice yoga. Krishna is saying here, the unbridled mind self-realization is difficult work at best, but whose mind is controlled, stable, steady, one who can remain even in difficult situations as the observer. I've seen, over the course of my years, various friends of mine who've left this world, who've departed. And one of the things I've noticed, especially those of very elevated Krishna consciousness, Sridhar Swami, Bhakti Tirtha Swami, very recently Kadambakanana Swami, there was a stepping back from their situation. All of them had, severe diseases. Sridhar Swami, liver cancer, and Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj had melanoma, I believe, and Kadambakanana Swami had cancer, and my godbrother Kurma Rupa. And so the one thing I noticed, due to their elevated state of consciousness, was they were able to step back from the dire situation that they were in. Their bodies were breaking down, failing, and yet the clarity of their perspective. We saw recently Kadambakanana Swami. He gave a lecture a few days before he departed this world. He barely had the strength to sit up. So clear was that lecture, so possessed of such clarity and such richness of heart. That is what we are striving for, because at the time of departure from this mortal body, that's the kind of mind we need to have. We can't be consumed by the turbulence and the restlessness. The stability, the steadiness, being the observer, watching as the body breaks down, and seeing, experiencing the difference between consciousness and mind. That's when the rubber really meets the road. When I went to see Srila Prabhupada right before his departure, the Kaviraj, the Ayurvedic doctor who was attending to him, was saying that any other person who had this condition would be screaming and writhing in pain. And I was there for 2 weeks with Prabhupada prior to his departure. And you never even heard him grunt or moan. I never heard. Of course, I wasn't with him 24/7, but I was there as much as I could be. And I was there chanting, doing kirtan from 12 midnight to 3 in the morning, while Prabhupada was resting, and never even hearing a groan, a moan of pain. of frustration. You know how when we get sick and we're in pain, we kind of get irritable and frustrated? Never. So this kind of maturity, mature observership is what we're striving for when we are regularly practicing doing our sadhana, because the mind wants to jump, right? When you doing your japa meditation, or if you practice some other yoga system, you're doing some form of meditation, the mind wants to jump out of it and into something else. But you have to bring it back. You have to, as the observer, you can see it, like a mother watching her child. If you go to the beach here in South Florida and you watch mothers in particular watch their child, if their child starts straying away, they're on it right away. The mother is hypersensitive to where the child is at, the well-being of the child. So that's what being a mature, evolved observer means. That when the mind is taking us somewhere that we shouldn't be going, then we can pull that mind back. Just as the mother grabs the hand of the child. Oh, don't go there. That wave will knock you over and drag you out to sea. Oh, don't touch that. That's a jellyfish. That jellyfish can sting you. You know, all these different kinds of scenarios that the child can end up getting itself into problems. But the mother is there. So when we're cultivating the understanding of Prakriti, Purush, mind, body demands through the perspective of consciousness as the observer, then this is how we can achieve this level that we're talking about. Krishna is saying, one who strives by appropriate means, abhyas, vairagya, is assured of success. And Krishna punctuates that by saying, that is my opinion. 37, Arjuna said, O Krishna, what is the destination of the unsuccessful transcendentalist who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization with faith, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? O mighty arm, this is 38. O mighty arm Krishna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. So what is the doubt? What if you weaken in your resolve and you fall away from the path? Does that mean, all the effort that you put into your sadhana, your practice, your cultivation, then it all perishes like a riven cloud? A cloud may be there and may be big and billowy, and then due to the influence of the wind, it's separated. So is that what happens? This is the question that Arjuna is asking. And this is his doubt. How are doubts dispelled? By knowledge. Therefore, Krishna says in 40, O son of Prita, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. So Krishna is saying it is a permanent. It is something that you're depositing in a permanent account. It is not something that just dwindles and fades away. What is that verse? Who knows that verse? Neha bikrama nashasti pratyavaya navedite swalpam punyam swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. From the greatest fear, that there's no loss or diminution in terms of your practice, your sadhana. What elevation you make, it's in a permanent account. And even there's some weakness of heart and you may fall from it, then you will pick up where you left off. I've seen in my 51-year history of practicing bhakti, I've seen some practitioners fall away, some for 1 year or 2 years or 20 years or 30 years, and then, pick right up and even stronger, when they had the realization that the material world and trying to enjoy it will not provide the ultimate benefit and should not be my highest goal. So even within a lifetime, I've seen people fall away and then come back even stronger. So Krishna is then reassuring Arjuna. He says, they're never overcome by evil. 41, the unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. 42. Or, if unsuccessful after long practice, so this first statement is if you've practiced a short time, then you elevate it to the heavenly planets, higher planets. You enjoy there when you realize that even that enjoyment, that level of enjoyment is not, not fulfilling, then one takes birth into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. A good example of this could be my friend Ambarish, who is the either great-great-grandson or great-grandson of Henry Ford. He's born into a family, multi-million-dollar family, and he himself is worth multi-millions of dollars. So when he had the good fortune of meeting Srila Prabhupada, he took to the process of bhakti very wonderfully and has dedicated his life. Even he is worth so much money and, has this aristocracy, rich aristocracy, and he is utilizing his time and his fortune in the service of the Supreme, in very much in the bhakti tradition. So the first thing, even if you perform some practice of yoga, that's what happens. Or if unsuccessful after a long period of time, long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly, such a birth is rare in this world. I feel so blessed in the fact that, we've moved down here to South Florida and Krishna has provided a wonderful Sangha that we participate with. And we see the children in this Sangha and are absolutely amazed, about how they can chant in kirtan, they can recite from memory verses of Bhagavad Gita. They have an inclination. I took my son to jiu-jitsu tonight, and I was speaking to one parent, and he was saying to me, I just have such a hard time. He has a 10-year-old boy. He said, my boy has no motivation. I have to beg him to come to jiu-jitsu. The father is, very macho, a former Marine and also practitioner of jiu-jitsu, very macho. So he really wants his son to be like him. And his son's not, his son's a little bit lazy and all he wants to do is play video games. And so once a week, he's promised his dad he'll come, like that. And, you see that this world has a lot of allurements. And if you have no commitment or conviction, you're not convinced that you need to do something more than be enamored by the world around you, then, you just waste the time for the rising and the setting of the sun. One cannot buy that back for all the gold in the world. So, as I was saying, in my wife and I and son have the good fortune to be part of the Sangha that meets, and to see these children with a taste for bhakti in a very real and genuine way is very, very encouraging and enthusing and enlivening to us as parents. Even in my own son, to every spontaneously he'll just break out into his own little kirtan. He'll be drawing or doing something, and you realize this is the result of involvement in past involvement in similar activities, bhakti activities, that they have this attraction. It's not accident. These kids have earned their position, and Krishna says that what you've done in the past, that is what you will receive in your next lives. So they'll take birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. And I see in our Sangha, the parents are certainly transcendentalists and are on a path of great wisdom. 43, on taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success. And we know the story of Bharat Maharaj, the classic story about how he was a great king, and he cultivated, he was a great devotee as well as a great king, and he cultivated a bhakti yoga mindset. And when he renounced the world and he went up to do contemplative bhakti in his own hermitage, he saved a baby deer from drowning, and he became quite attached to that baby deer. And as when you become attached, you're always thinking of what you're attached to. So Bharat Maharaj, even he's a great practitioner, bhakti yoga practitioner, he became attached to this deer. So when the deer disappeared, he couldn't find, he went out searching, and he met with his demise. And then in his next life, he had to take birth as a deer. But he was so advanced that he retained consciousness. He retained an elevated consciousness. And then in his next life, he also retained elevated consciousness as Jad Bharat, and became the great sage Jad Bharat, who taught King Rahugana. So this is what is meant by what Krishna is saying. That you'll take birth in this family of transcendentalists and you'll revive your consciousness. And even if your consciousness is revived at 76, it means that you have tread the path and you are now having an awakening. So from our perspective, our bhakti perspective, it is never too late, especially, if you have some bhakti sukriti. There's different types of sukriti. That means, pious activities. If you've performed sukriti, pious activities in bhakti, you've chanted before in a previous life, or you tasted prasadam, or you had good sangha, etc., bhakti sukriti, or you've witnessed the Rath Yatra while you were shopping at Macy's on Fifth Avenue in New York City, and the Rath Yatra cart goes by. Jagannath is so powerful that he blesses you, and that is your good fortune. A bhakti sukriti means it will come to you. So it is never too late. It can happen in a moment, in the blink of an eye, if we are truly. What is required to be a successful yogi? And this is a requirement to be successful in anything. Conviction. What is conviction? It means you have belief, or you're persuaded, or you're convinced above all else that I must be doing this. This is what I must be doing. There's one psychologist, when she analyzed what are the pillars of success in life, one of the first and foremost things that she outlines, I have the 4 pillars, I can't remember them right now, but the one I remember, which is relevant to what I'm saying, is purpose. Purpose in life. And not just purpose in life, meaningful purpose. That's one of the things. If we don't have a meaningful purpose in our life, we're missing one of the pillars that can bring us a successful and happy life. So, 44, by virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. 45, I want to get to the end before we end. And when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately achieving perfection after many, many births of practice, attains the supreme goal. 46. A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. Now here he's talking to a warrior. Krishna is talking to a warrior. And what is he telling him? Be a yogi. That means have purpose, the single-pointed purpose of controlling the mind and immersing the mind, if you're a bhakti yoga practitioner, in seva, in devotional service. Make that the purpose of life with conviction. And then one elevates oneself, one's consciousness, very, very quickly. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. And this is an answer to a question. I think it's the last. Yes. And this is an answer to the question, the perennial question about yoga. And of all, this is 47, the last verse. This is not a coincidence. This is the last verse of Dhyana Yoga. And the next verse starts the Bhakti Yoga section of Gita. So Krishna says, and of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me, is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. And again, Krishna says, that is my opinion. So here Krishna is saying, we've discussed previously that the ultimate reality, the absolute truth, has 3 features. Paramatmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan iti Shabdyate. It has 3 aspects. Brahman, the imperishable, immortal happiness of the existence, the eternal existence. That's the way Krishna describes it in the 14th chapter. the Brahman realization, the Paramatma realization, that when one is able to see the presence of divinity next to your heart, next to your soul, there is another soul, ever willing to give guidance and to provide intelligence and how to pursue your path home back to Godhead. And then Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna says right here in this verse, that is the most complete. It's the highest yoga. Why? Because a bhakti yogi has Brahman realization. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, na sochiti na kankshiti. One can see with equal vision. A dog, you hear the dog? A dog eater, a Brahmin, he sees all things with equal vision. That's Brahman realization. That means one can see that the nature of the eternal soul within all living entity. So the Bhakti Yogi can see that. The Bhakti Yogi knows that there's Paramatma within the heart, Super Soul within the heart, and offers worship to that Paramatma, and eventually that Paramatma becomes your manifests as your Ishtadev. In other words, if you are worshiping Radha Krishna, and a specific form of Radha Krishna, Radha Govinda, Radha Damodar, Radha Shyam Sundar, then that Paramatma manifests as your Ishtadev that you serve. So you're able to actually, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur calls the heart area where the Paramatma resides, he calls it the temple of the heart, or the temple of the mind. Momomana mondire rohoni siddhi Krishna Murari Sri Krishna Murari. That within that temple of my heart resides Sri Krishna Murari. So this is why Krishna is making that definitive statement, because when one is immersed in bhakti, one can see all three aspects of divinity. But if one is only, and then there's another reason too, but if one only sees Brahman, then one does not care for others. One only cares for one's liberation and emergence into Brahman. But in bhakti, there's an overwhelming sense of compassion that any living entity that is steeped in the mode of passion or ignorance needs help to revive its eternal divine consciousness. So in Brahman realization, there is no Bhagavan. There is no Paramatma. All is illusion. But in bhakti, everything exists. Everything is in its place. And therefore, one can see with the full spectrum of transcendence. One can see and experience and be absorbed in the full spectrum of transcendence. So I'll stop here. If anyone has a comment, observation, question, please feel free to ask.
I'm sorry to be in the dark, but my connection is really lousy.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So I wanted to say that the four pillars are perseverance, purpose, passion, and possibility.
Thank you. Thank you. That really helps.
Of course, I had to look them up.
I guess did you listen to the same class that I did on YouTube?
No, no, I just Well, God Google, so.
Ah, Godgle. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I have it in my notes. I just didn't want to rummage through my notes. My wife always chastises me. Don't get distracted by doing something else. So I didn't want
Well,
to
like
go.
everybody else.
Does anyone have any questions? Sid or Ishwari, Shaktiman?
Prabhu, thank you for this always engaging class and more enlightenment on this path. And this bhakti, this dhyana yoga is very nice. How you started with the 35 text, correct?
Yeah.
Or
33.
33. Okay. So I love the fact that you said, the highest goal is possible by practice, suitable practice. And when we have this practice, I realized for myself in my life, when I first began this process, it was like you said, mine was like unbridled. It was like going crazy. And I would just do some chanting and my mind would go here and there. Oh, but this is happening. But what about this? And it's like, there's no solution to that unless you really sit down and you really focus on hearing the Mahamantra. I said, it's that simple, just hearing the Mahamantra. It took a long time. My goodness.
Yeah.
So
Well, the good news is it's working.
yeah. Yeah.
That's the good
Fun.
news. Yeah, because you see what's naturally if you're without this kind of sadhana, there's a natural deterioration of the mind. So if there's weakness of mind, which means inability to control it, and then that muscle, the mind, is growing weaker with age, then what's going to happen? Things are going to be becoming. That's why people, as they get elderly, unless they're really locked into a meaningful purpose in their life, whether it's education or, you see some doctors, they practice medicine until they're 80, 85. They have some meaningful purpose there in their life. There's deterioration of the mind and confusion and bewilderment and what's next. I don't know. So that's why conviction is a very important component to success in one's path of yoga. We must have that conviction to do our sadhana and practice vairagya. Yes, Shaktiman.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Prabhupada. Thank you for the wonderful lecture. I really liked it, and I have a takeaway like what you said. We have to listen, reflect, and share. And that is something I need to work on myself. Yeah.
Yes.
And I really like the joke that you said, Trinavata is coming, right? Yeah. When you're yeah. And sorry I missed your classes because I had to go to office on Wednesdays and I'm coming late from work and I'm missing the classes.
Yeah, no problem. I understand. Life is there before us, our obligations to family and work and all that. So thank you for attending this evening. Always wonderful to have your association.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Very good.
So if there's no question, then we can adjourn for this evening. I'll see you all. You all have a healthy, happy, and holy week. And I hope to see you next Wednesday. I think next Wednesday is the 25th, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah. Well, whatever it is, we'll see you next Wednesday. Until that time, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.